This conference will now be recorded.
January 22nd, we're ready to call the meeting to order and verify the quorum.
Rick?
Present.
Brian?
Here.
Jeff?
Here.
Julie? Here. Eric?
Here.
Lori? Here. And Annie? Here.
Okay, quorum is verified. At this time, if we have any members of the public, I don't see any, but it's the opportunity for public input. Hearing none, we can just move on. The action items, adoption of October 23rd, 2023 board meeting minutes. Do we have a motion to adopt those meetings?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay. Rick?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Julie? Yes. Eric?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
And Annie?
Yes.
Okay. And we're on to the approval of the LEDS policy and procedure. Any discussion on that? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second.
Rick?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
And Annie?
Yes.
Okay, on to old business. All for our budget report.
Okay. Early in the session, of course, you're sure that net income is going to be a negative due to the fact that we have income still coming in. Budget-wise, we do a very tight tracking just by any due to the fact of our income seems to be a little lower already starting. So as a budget person, I'm concerned. So I'll be doing a lot more reports for the board down the road, different situations happening, and what we can do to save. We've already took one step for our office. We've already cut out our cleaning budget janitorial, our own garbage. We can handle it later on back. We'll take turns. But as of right now, nothing I'm jumping out that I'm really concerned about yet.
Okay. On to the licensing report. Jeff?
Thank you, Rick. Okay, so these numbers are all developed as of December 31st, 2023. That was the end of the last quarter that we're reporting on. As of December 31st, 2023, we had 594 active certified general appraisers, 638 certified residential active appraisers, and 137 state licensed active appraisers. The overall trend that we're seeing here is kind of as we'd expected, given what's been going on market-wise in the last 2 years. We've held numbers fairly steady from 2018 through about 2022. A little bit of ups and downs. This is the first real significant decline that we've seen in the overall number of total active appraisers, given that our numbers right now, well, as of December 31st, we're looking at 1,369 as compared to this time last year, which was 1,406, which is not a, I mean, it's not a huge drop, but that's statistically significant. It's more than 10%. Well, no, I guess it wouldn't be more than 10%, but that's, you know, it's getting into the realm of numbers that we're noticing. As of December 31st of 2023, we had 21 inactive certified general appraisers who could potentially reactivate their licenses if they so chose. 24 inactive certified residential appraisers and 14 inactive state licensed appraisers for a total number of inactive appraisers at 59. Appraiser assistants have followed a similar trend that we've seen kind of with appraisers. It might even look a little more pronounced because the number of assistants is smaller. So we held steady really from 2018 through about 2021. Generally, we had about the same number roughly of assistants overall in Oregon. We saw a jump in 2022 and a significant drop from 2022 to 2023. Some of that is due to a huge number of audits that you'll hear about later on in the meeting during my administrative session, update session. We did a large number of audits this last year and onboarded a whole bunch of new licenses. A good number of those that were audited passed. But the bottom line being that some of that change in the total population of assistants it is related to people moving forward through the traditional licensing process, going supervisor to experience through the experience, then testing and being credentialed. So given that the market has slowed down a little bit over the last couple of is hyperbolic, the market has significantly slowed over the last 2 years, and that I think in turn has reduced the number of assistants that people aren't necessarily looking to get into the business as assistants, and B, those that are supervisors, given the work volume changes, maybe pulling in their horns, so to speak, a little bit, just given that might not be able to support 1, 2, or 3 assistants on the total number. And that relates more to residential than commercial, I think. But as far as the number of assistants, it is declined a little bit, which is why another reason why Perea is going to be a really important, useful tool moving forward.
May I ask a question?
You may.
So are we able, I don't think we are currently, but are we able to collect demographic information on trainees or licensees?
We can request it. It's
Okay.
not all, but they can't obligate them to provide it. Historically, given the fact that we don't raise our.
And this is wonderful, nobody can hear you.
Leaf blower, folks. Sorry about that.
That's awesome.
Not just in your home meetings, but in the
I
office
know,
too.
right.
So the question one more time.
Well,
I'm sorry, what was the question? What was the question? I couldn't hear it.
the question was whether or not we could, or if we wanted to collect demographic information on trainees and appraisers in the state of Oregon.
Right, and yes, we can ask for it. We can't require it.
Right.
And the reason that we haven't done so far is because it really bears nothing to do with how we credential folks.
Right.
We're concerned with minimum levels of competency and compliance with use path and things like that. At no point does demographics play into that
That's a good
licensing
answer,
decision.
I like that.
So
Thank you. I'm gonna use
but
that.
given where we're at, in terms of the intent of the board moving forward and the overall arcing trends of conversations nationally, it might not be the worst idea in the world to include that stuff on our application so that those that choose to provide it can. That would give us a little better indication of who are we licensing, where are they located, all of that, the vital statistics data, even if it's not relevant to licensing them, it might be relevant to determining how well we're diversifying the appraisal profession.
Okay.
So we absolutely can do that. And the last number here is, as of December 31st, 2023, we had 106 registered AMCs in the state. And if we look back from 2018 to 2023, we can see a little bit of a wobble, but a pretty decided downward trend. And I don't know, some of that is probably due to the market changes, but and consolidation of the larger AMCs buying up the smaller ones. We've seen that in quite a few cases here in Oregon. So that's not necessarily indicative of a decline in the number of AMCs as far as business-wise. It could just mean fewer are getting more of the work, if that makes sense. That pretty well concludes the licensing report. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, we're on to the enforcement report.
And that's me again. Thank you, Rick. Now, again, these numbers are as of December 31st, 2023. Cases closed last quarter, and the last October through December, generally speaking, getting people on the phone, reliability of having, investigation interviews, things like that, things tend to slow down right around Halloween through the end of the year, investigative-wise, just through a number of factors. So last quarter, we closed 8 cases. As of December 31st, we had 109 active open cases. That number is different today because as things come in, we vet them. Some of them move forward, some of them don't. And this number reflects cases that had not been vetted yet. So some of them move forward, some of them didn't. I don't have an exact count as of today, but it's not 100. As far as our open cases, we currently have 3 AMC cases that are investigations in process. These 3 are not related to any necessarily consumer allegation reports. These are related to administrative issues, late filing of reports, failing to file reports, things like that we have to follow up on because it's in the rules, but that don't necessarily reflect that an AMC is doing something wrong in the marketplace and harming folks. So these are not quite as urgent as far as the priority of investigation, but they are currently being investigated in process. As of December 31st, we had 106 open appraiser cases. 4 of those are before you folks today for approval. We have an additional 5 in process investigations, and at least 2 of those are nearing the end of the investigation process. For the next Enforcement Oversight Committee, I'm sorry, actually that would have been for the January Enforcement Oversight Committee. There were 2 to the Enforcement Oversight Committee, which leaves 95 allegations pending. That allegation pending status being that we've taken in the complaint or the allegation, we've vetted it and done the initial look over to see whether or not the allegations hold any merit or relevance, and or if we found anything else. And then those have moved on to being waiting to be assigned to an investigator. And generally speaking, we investigate these chronologically unless the issues presented in the allegations are of a clear, pretty clear and present danger to public trust or safety, or relate to the ethics or fraud of an appraiser. Things that are serious and significant in nature kind of go to the front of the line. But beyond that, so we have 95 allegations pending. Okay, within that number.
Chad, sorry, just a question about those allegations pending. How many of those are from Fannie Mae? Do we know?
I don't have an exact number on that. I could look that up potentially. It's probably I don't want to say the majority overall in terms of like out of 109, there's 85 Fannie Mae complaints, but a good number of them are related to Fannie Mae's appraisal quality initiative that they've been running, algorithmic reviews and things on files. And to be honest, some of those don't necessarily bear fruit, but we've got to take all of them that come. And secondary to that, Fannie Mae has pointed out through their exhaustive review process some cases that really, really needed to move forward to us and that we wouldn't have been aware of without their help. So it's a double-edged sword because yes, Fannie Mae is affecting our appraisal complaint volume significantly, but of those complaints, a good number of them are relevant, and they don't all relate to fraud or horrible huge issues, but there is merit to a good number of them.
Okay, thank you.
And I actually, it sounds like a little elf just told me we have 25 from Fannie Mae, I believe, currently. So of 109, 25 is a chunk. That's about 25%. But it's not. It is, but it's not half. So I guess we've got that going for us. So as of December 31st, of the 109 active open cases, 76 are over 1 year old. Those are where we're putting the majority of the investigators' attention, unless we need to move on a different case because of some more serious issues. We have 66 of those 76 are allegations that are in pending status, meaning that they need to be investigated. 4 of them are in process investigations. So 1 of the 5 that we have being currently investigated was filed within the last year, meaning that it moved forward because of priority, because of the allegations. So the other 4 out of the 5 that we're investigating are those older cases that we need to get off the books and get dealt with. The 2 that we had to the enforcement committee in December or in January earlier were among those year-old cases, and all 4 of the ones that you folks will be deciding on today are with the over a year old. So we'll be knocking those off the open case list as well. And that concludes the enforcement report, unless there's any questions.
Okay, we're on to approval of the board orders. First one is a corrective action agreement. It's case number 20-2439, and the action taken is education. Any discussion on this case? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second.
Rick,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Julie? Yes. Eric,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. The second case is 20-2443, and again, the action taken is education. Any discussion on this case? Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second.
Rick,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Julie? Yes. Eric,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
and Annie.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. We have final consent orders, 2021 dash, no, got bad eyes, 21-2472, and the action taken is civil penalty and suspension. Discussion on this case? Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll second.
Okay, Rick,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
and Annie.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. The next case is 21-2477, and again, a civil penalty and suspension. Any discussion on this case? Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. I'll second.
Got Lori with the second. Okay, Rick,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
and Annie.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Next is my report. We're having several members expire this year, myself and Brian included, and one other, I believe.
I believe Eric also.
Eric. So we're gonna need some new board members.
This is true, yeah.
I think Brian and I are both in June of this year. So it's been a pleasure doing this.
Likewise, Rick.
It's almost over. 8 years.
We absolutely appreciate all the hard work and time that you folks put into the board here. I know that it's been a long road and not necessarily a thankful road in some cases, but very, very appreciated.
It's been very
I couldn't
educational.
do my job without you at all. This place wouldn't exist without you.
It certainly is an improvement to my practice. I think Brian can say the same thing. We've learned a lot, gained a lot through the process. Appreciate being able to do this for the board and for the appraiser community.
May I ask a question on that point?
Sure.
So I know that there was quite a delay in filling my seat, for example. If the same thing were to occur, would you continue to serve, or we just?
Would be, I think, primarily up to the governor's office. I believe in the past, they've made exceptions where they didn't have a seat, a person to fill the seat and they weren't able to make quorums. They would allow the previous board member to serve for temporary limited capacity. They don't probably encourage that too much. So it's really, that's why I'm more or less always talking to folks about board service. So it's, yeah, that's kind of an ongoing process.
Okay.
We have to
And I understand my seat was a little harder to fill.
just with the AMC stuff, because there's only so many AMCs that are domiciled in Oregon, or AMC employees or representatives that live here, of the, 106 or something like that, right? Of the 106, I don't think more than 5 have offices here necessarily. They have places for service and process, but they don't have physical.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you for.
Sure.
Do they have to be residential appraisers?
No.
They
Oh,
can
no.
be commercial?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, it's probably best to have kind of an even smattering between the 5 board positions that are appraisers, to have more than just one perspective and discipline on the board, so that, as we hear cases and things, the board has that knowledge for all the little pieces, because, not every certified residential appraiser knows the same things, and that gets even more amplified in the commercial world or the certified general world with all the various specialties.
Okay, administrators report.
Back to my report, okay. So this is the time of year where I like to give you folks a little update on what we did last year as far as our licensee population, what audits were done, applications, things like that. It kind of gives us a picture of where we're headed, and we can start trending what the next year or two is going to look like. So these are all numbers developed as, again, December 31st being the last end of the last quarter. In 2023, we did a total of 17 audits for supervising appraisers, which sounds fairly low, but 13 of the 17 were approved. So given that that's a pretty difficult thing to talk someone into doing, unless they're already a supervisor, that's a pretty decent number. Audits for new licensees last year, we completed 48 audits. Of those 48, 40 passed for the exam, were approved to take the exam. And that has to do with, feedback during the audit process. I think that speaks, again, also to the quality of training that those folks got, being able to move forward through that auditing process to take the exam. Of the 40 that passed the audits or that were approved to take the exam, 10 were state licensed, applying for the state licensed appraiser credential. 23 were applying to take the certified residential exam, and 7 applied for the certified general as a license level. And that number, I guess that kind of tracks given work volumes and appraiser populations overall. We've seen an upward tick, really, I think, in the number of certified general appraisers in Oregon. But as far as historical numbers, there's always been a little bit more residential work, and so the population of residential appraisers is higher. New appraiser assistant registrations in 2023, we had 13. Now, that's not the ones that renewed and are continuing through the process. These are new unique assistants that became that went to work for supervisors. And that, interestingly enough, 13 new assistants that in 23, and we approved 13 new supervisors in 2023. That could be coincidental. I don't know what the interplay between those numbers is, but generally speaking, if somebody's not a supervisor and they find somebody that they are interested in and willing to train, they have to go through that endorsement process with us before they can become a supervisor. So that very well could relate to the number of assistants that registered last year. New licenses issued via audit and exam. This doesn't include the reciprocity, but of the people that were approved to take the exam between January 1 and the end of the year last year, 31 passed their exams. So out of the 40 that were audited and approved to take the exam, 31 have already passed. Now, the ones that were done in December, they have 6 months to 3 attempts at the exam over 6 months. So realistically, the December approvals might not have even taken their exam yet. They may be, somewhere in that process. So we might end up with 40 approved for the exam in 2023, and all 40 of those at some point in 2023 before passing and becoming appraiser. Let's see here. Yeah, new licenses issued via audit and exam 31. Okay, so new licenses issued via reciprocity, 76 in the state via reciprocity. Other appraisers coming in from out of state. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing. That indicates that there's work volume here that there might not be elsewhere. Of the 76 reciprocal licenses issued, 3 were for state licensed appraisers, 12 were for certified residential appraisers, and 61 were for certified generals. So that tells me that segment of the market is getting a little bit busier, and or there's more call for certified general level knowledge even in residential appraisals in some cases. And some of that might have to do with some of the zoning changes, challenges, issues that they've seen in ours and other jurisdictions. It's a changing market out there that's favoring higher density residential stuff on pretty much every property. So that, and some of those analyses inherently are too complex for a certified residential appraiser for our scope of practice. Let's see. So between all of our assistants, all of our exam licensees, and the reciprocity, in 2023, we issued a total of 120 new unique registrations, licenses, certifications, which is a good number. Factor that in with the overall fact that we are still seeing a decline. At least we're eating up some of the numbers that are the appraisers that are exiting the industry for either retirement or the number of various reasons that they might make that change. So we do have a good number of folks coming in, and I think the approval of Perea here upcoming shortly, or assuming that that's the direction we're still going, that's also going to be another one of those tools in the toolbox to help maintain the appraiser population and provide training to people that can't find supervisors.
Go AI. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah. Secondary to that, that audit and application report, I wanted to just fill you folks in on a little change that we made. Because of the adoption of the 2024 edition of USPAC and the addition of the non-discrimination clause and some of the other changes to the book and some of the language, we went ahead and modified or amended the audit checklist that we use for our pre-licensing and supervising appraiser audits. It's also very, very similar to the checklist that we use in an investigation to kind of act as a guide for appraisers or for the investigator to move through the appraisal process and the report and verify whether or not everything is, compliant in terms of record keeping, standard 1, standard 2. The only significant meaningful change in this form really relates to the checklist item that talks about the ethics rule. Really, the only addition is the addition of that non-discrimination section. So just wanted to make you folks aware of that minor change to the audit form for those board members that do help out with volunteer audits. But it's a pretty minor change, and the tone, intent, and basic content of the form really doesn't change that much. That more or less concludes my report to you folks. Oh, I'm sorry, I have one more thing to talk about in the administrator's report, and that is an update on the rulemaking activities. You heard me reference Perea a couple of times. We were really trying hard, and I kind of had mentioned it in a couple of other board meetings. We've been working since about mid-year last year to try and align all of our rules and get the Perea rules written in so that they blend with our existing rules. In addition to that, because of the AQB change to some of the criteria, the addition of a fair housing and non-discrimination, the fair housing laws and regulations requirement for education, we wanted to include those in the rule changes. The goal being not going back multiple times this year to the Secretary of State's office to file more rules and more amendments and more things. What they've advised us is if you know it's coming, don't file 15 rule changes with us. File one that includes 15 things.
So this can all be done by rule. We don't have to go back to the legislature.
Perea does not, the way that our structure is written, and in fact, the legislature last year passed a bill that included, it did modify some of the language in I believe it's 674-310 that gives the board its authority, and included, was unnecessary, but still it's not a bad change, included the allowance that gives the board the ability to approve and require education for appraisers. And I don't know the exact language, Scott might know the exact stuff in the bill, but it essentially puts it into law that this board can require the fair housing education stuff. So in addition to that, because our rules really govern how we navigate things, we're adding that into our education criteria rules and adding the course approval criteria for the courses for fair housing. All of those things have to go into existing rule. So when you start doing that, you want to review everything that came before and after to make sure there's no conflicts. The rules are essentially written at this point. We're in the process of reviewing and kind of finalizing and tweaking things so that they don't conflict and that they're clear in terms of what they require, what appraisers are allowed, what we're required to have them give us, things like that. So what I would anticipate is that all of that review process and the fine tuning should be ready for you folks to review and consider moving forward with the rulemaking process, either at the end of February or potentially early March. Either of those date timeframes would still allow us the required public exposure time period for public comment and all of those things, and to hold the hearing prior to an April board meeting where theoretically you all could approve that. So as of right now, we are still working on fine tuning and finalizing, Perea being the primary thing that has to fit into all the other rules. And Scott actually was very helpful about a year ago and provided some example language that I leaned on pretty heavily, to be honest. But still within that, I've got to make sure that we're not conflicting with other requirements or making things unclear and providing loopholes for people because if things are unclear, we can't enforce them. So we just got to be really careful inserting rules into existing program criteria, which is where we're at. So I look for that probably to be done in the next month-ish. So that would be one of the other things that you folks can consider today is if you want now to schedule a board meeting upcoming, or if you want to do that down the road and just communicate with me, we can always make that public announcement too, well ahead of time of any other board meeting.
Would it make more sense to wait until you know exactly?
For sure, 100%. That's not the worst idea because I do have other moving parts and things that are in process. So Yeah, I can reach out to all of you and get your individual feedback on it if and when we want to hold a board meeting between now and the April one. And then we could give public notice for all of that stuff. Let's see, and that does conclude my administrative report, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have the whole agenda in front of me, but yeah, the audit updates, everything else. Yeah, I think that pretty well concludes my portion. Any questions?
Thanks, Jeff.
Nice work. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you.
so procedurally, I believe we're going to move into executive session. Do we need to close this out?
That's a relevant question for procedure.
So while you're in open session, you're going to need to read the script,
Okay.
which is what allows the board to go into executive session. And then once we start the executive session, we make sure that there isn't any member of the public remaining. And then,
I'm sorry, can you speak up? We can't hear you. Sorry.
I'm sorry about that.
where is the microphone?
At the front of the room, yeah.
Okay, so I just provided some instructions to Rick about the script that he needs to read to go into executive session so that we're exiting the public session. Then we'll do the training. That is on item 7 of the agenda. So I'll be providing some handouts. Those of you that are remote, if you didn't already get an email, you'll get an email with a handout that looks kind of like this. I know it's kind of small, but it's for you to follow along on the presentation.
Okay. Okay. The board will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660, subsection 2 and F, which allows the board to meet in executive session to consider information that is exempt from public inspection. Representatives of news media and designated staff may attend the executive session. All other meeting attendees are asked to leave the room. Those attending by phone will be placed on temporary hold. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and public attendees may rejoin the meeting.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, we're ready to exit the executive session. And unless there were any other discussion, I believe we're ready for adjournment. Any other questions or discussion?
Move that we adjourn.
Okay, it is.
Eric, I'll second it.
Okay. Eric with the second. We've got Rick,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
and Annie.
Yes.
Okay, it is 10:33 and we are adjourned.
10:33.